Hi, everyone. I'm Casey, as you know, a vocalist, bassist, and composer, and I am bringing people together to talk about creativity and music. And I'm so excited to welcome my friend Akhil Gopal. He's a film and TV composer based in Los Angeles. He studied jazz, trumpet, and film scoring at Berklee College of Music. He currently composes, orchestrates, and edits music for Pokemon Journeys, the series, under composer Ed Goldfarb. He has composed music for a variety of other projects, including an American public TV documentary, an animated feature-length Pokemon movie, a classic silent film, and several short films on the festival circuit. He is passionate about languages, social justice, Indian food, and bringing stories to life through music, with music. Hi, Akhil.
Hi, I'm a really big fan of yours as well, so happy to be talking here.
So excited to be here talking about creativity and music. And I'm curious to know what your creative life looks like in quarantine right now.
So the great thing about the job that I've had working for composer Ed Goldfarb is that it's been working from home for a long time. From the beginning, he lives in the Bay Area,
Mm.
so that aspect of my life in terms of Pokemon has not changed. I work 3 feet from where I sleep. Um, I would say that it does put a lot of uncertainty into other composition projects and film scoring and also the ability of musicians to play together in a room. So um, there are ways that myself and every other composer are being impacted, but luckily in terms of the my ability to pay my rent, it's so far remained remained steady, which is I know not true for so many people right now.
Mm. So it sounds like your work has not been impacted, but your creative work, collaborating with other people and musicians, instrumentalists, vocalists, is impacted because it brings people together.
Yeah, in fact, I'm really curious to know, for you, when a huge part of your work is um, singing together with other singers in the same room, how you've been able to adapt that to this pandemic situation when um, it's one of the most dangerous things to do in terms of an airborne virus. Are there ways that you've used technology to get around that, or because I could definitely learn so much more about how to make music with other musicians during this time.
Hmm. That's a great question. It has been a challenge, as it is for most creative people, especially, well, not especially. Musicians are impacted. And like you're saying, singers with an airborne disease, I mean, choirs coming together, people singing together is a no-no, for
Hmm.
lack of a better way to say it. And so, I mean, I've done a lot of collaborating like this
Hmm.
over the internet. It's not the same thing, but
Hmm.
making videos and finding new ways to work with people, I think it has challenged us as creators and musicians to think differently. And
Hmm.
in truth, some new things have come of it that I probably never would have done. And so I'm stretching in new ways. Are there ways that you find yourself stretching in this time that have been surprising?
Yeah, I've I'm not trying to say that I've been as consistent as I should be, but I've been really enjoying playing piano by and for myself. Um, and even trying to get rid of a sense of a goal of how good I should get, because my principal instrument is trumpet, and trumpet is a very hard instrument in my opinion to feel fully satisfied with playing by yourself. It's a monophonic instrument. unless you have some cool extended techniques. But it's really about playing trumpet, with others in this. And I think that obviously there's nothing like that for any instrument, including piano. But I've been really enjoying hacking my way through, you know, easier intermediate level classical pieces and trying to appreciate them more without anybody hearing except for my roommates who are subjected to it.
Hmm.
So
So
that's new for me in terms of um, the regularity in which I'm doing it, but it's not ideal. I would love to have 3 hours a day to do that.
sounds like you have something that that's coming into yourself and your own music only for you. Piano only for you.
Mhm.
Oh,
Mhm.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, you came for a few days doing the. I have a daily songwriting group with friends,
Yeah,
and so that's been something that's been for me and only for me, creating with nobody, not with any intention in mind, just creating for the sake of creating and to flex that muscle and write.
yeah. That's an incredible practice that I really wish I did every day because I like that you said flex that muscle because it really I feel like for me what that muscle is the ability to suspend self-criticism when you are suspend meaning it's still a helpful thing to be able to analyze and critique what you did if you're holding it for the right moment. But when I compose, if I'm in a state or if I'm not in a state where I have been able to suspend that, I play one note and then I'm like, oh, that's bad. So
Mm,
then it makes, getting past that first, blank page, metaphorically or literally, um, a struggle. And if I haven't done it for a week, I feel every single time that I don't know how to do it. I've never composed before, and that um, I'll crash and burn. And the more regularly I do it, the more that I can enter that process with a little bit of faith that no, I have done this before, and even though it's a blank page right now, I know that somehow by 2 a.m. this morning it won't be.
wow, that is surprising and humbling to hear you say that because you're a composer first. I mean, that's at least that's how I think about you. So
Mhm.
I'm surprised to hear you say that.
I I I'd be surprised if a lot of composers didn't feel that way, or I should put it this way: if somebody doesn't feel that way, I want what they're having because it's a scary emotion. Every single time you start, you feel like you're starting from the beginning,
Mhm.
unless you do it so regularly that so for me that's why I think so many composers also crave well there's a lot of reasons why but I think a lot of people crave busyness even if they complain about it when they're busy because when you're busy you don't have to face like the void of and you also it feels weird to say you're a composer if you've gone 2 or 3 weeks without composing so for me that's actually one of the blessings of a TV show. If you are working on films as opposed to TV shows, every time one film ends and if you don't have another lined up, it's very scary to face that emptiness.
One thing I wanted to ask you, which relates to this, is what are internal barriers that you face as a creative person, and what do you do? Well, I'll start there. What internal barriers do you face as a creative person?
Um, I think that one thing that I'm still trying to figure out that um, I should be more intentional in trying to figure out is what is my original sound and my original style. I feel like um, there are people way younger than me that I think are incredibly inspiring that seem to have almost been born with that. And I think that it's also okay to have it take a while to figure that out. I think one of the things that is a relief about doing film or TV work is that since it's work for hire and you're constantly trying to create something to fit a larger project in which you are just a cog. In fact, you're you're serving a story that is way more important than, at least in terms of the hierarchy of like this one moment, it's way more important than whether or not you come across as a quote unquote good composer. And because of that, you can sort of sidestep that question temporarily because you think I don't have to make Akhil music, I can make horror music, or I can make suspenseful music here. And you just hope that your individual stamp will emerge through that, even without being able to help it, because it's embedded in all of your personal reactions to what you're watching and trying to create music to correspond to. But I think that I have a lot of admiration for people who, including yourself, who create music primarily to represent you and your name and put it out there as this is me, this is my music, this is my original contribution to the world. So I think that's an internal barrier I face. I also think that in the world of film and TV music, there's also a danger in trying too hard to be original. If you um, if you end up making music that is not doing his job first and foremost as an element of filmmaking, because if you it can actually distract from the story, it can actually not achieve the purpose that the music was intended to achieve in that scene, whether that's you know helping a scene be funny or helping a scene be scary or whatever. um, you know that's a manifestation of ego. So part of it is also like knowing like when to check that ego and to just do the job. And also part of it is there's a relief in that because then you don't have to actually confront what my music is. You don't have to really confront what is my original contribution to the world. So I think that I have been able to do that sometimes outside of there's a small piano and string quartet piece that I've done. I also think that you do that when you're like an improvising musician and you have to come up with what your improvisational style is. Um, but I think that there is a contradiction within film scoring that's ironically become a little bit of a relief for me, where I don't have. But I would love to. I would love to dive deeper into that, to dive deeper into myself, and to figure out what my own music is over the course of the next few decades.
Wow, that's an exciting idea that I would love to hear your original music. I mean,
Mm.
I've heard your arrangements and I've heard some of your compositions for your films that you've worked on.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're saying, I mean, I'm learning so much about you today, even though I've known you for a year. Uh, you're saying, oh, well, the film composition and me composition is totally different, and they're kind of two worlds that I wouldn't say. I don't think you're saying fight against each other, but they're distinct.
Yeah, and I guess I wouldn't say that they're totally different in that two different people can score the same scene and it'll come across very differently. So my personality is evident in what I do regardless.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there is an element of conscious decision making in deciding what your original style is when you compose stuff that's not work for hire.
Mm.
And actually, for you, I wonder was there a process to developing that? Because when I hear your music, and especially your melodies, there there is there's a really distinct and recognizable element there. And I'm wondering, did it start off as imitating other people and then it ended up as yourself, or how did you come up with that? And then also, is that linked to an original sound for your literal voice, or like did you feel like your literal voice was at first not quite your own and then you had to make it your own, or do you feel like that was always original to you?
Wow, lots of questions. Okay, I'm gonna think about that. I want to say hi to Christopher Still, who's joining us. Akhil, you actually introduced me to him, so thanks for being here,
Yeah,
Christopher.
I feel so lucky to have been able to have private lessons with him through my grad school, and he's just yeah, a very inspiring teacher. Really an incredible teacher. So
Thanks for being here, Chris. And hi, Sonia and Shirley. Nice to see you on this live stream. Yeah, so okay, lyrics and melodies. Where did it all start? I mean, I can definitely credit The Sound of Music. That was the first vocal music that I sang that holds a dear memory in my heart. And I love that music. I love singing it. I could sing all of those songs around the house for a while. And how does one find their voice?
mhm,
I mean, their creative voice. That's that's a little bit of an elusive question, but I would say, I mean, I'd say for myself that I started. I started and I attempted to try things and experiment and see what came out and have different feelings about if I thought that was
mhm,
good or bad.
mhm,
And as I am creating more material and more work, it becomes a little bit easier to step back and think and be neutral about it, you know, because
mhm.
especially with the writing group that I was mentioning that you've come to every day
Right.
for the past few months, it, yeah, it's kind of changed my relationship with sound and
Mm,
what is sound. And I mean, I'm going quite expansive here, but what something that comes out is something that comes out. And
mhm,
that's what it is. And so I think it's shifted my relationship with it being the sound of the day. It's kind of like
mhm,
sonic diary. I don't have
mhm.
to enjoy it, but it's what happened.
There's this there's this essay that I read. I was so lucky because my mom actually found this essay and decided that it so spoke to her about creativity and she thought it would be so useful for me that she actually sent me the book. And it's called, well, the essay is called The Getaway Car, and it's by Ann Patchett. And one thing that she talks about, and she's talking about from the standpoint of writing words on a page, but she talks about it as like, she recommends a practice where you sit with a paper and a pencil for a specific amount of time a day, maybe it's 2 hours, and you just sit there. You don't even necessarily have to write anything, but with no distractions, with a paper and a pencil.
Mm,
And I actually, the thing that you're talking about, this half an hour exercise, kind of reminds me a lot of that because it's, as you said, kind of a diary where um, it's all about just showing up to that moment and being ready for whatever may come from that moment without any um, need for it to be brilliant. Um, and I've always wanted to have a regular practice like that. So the fact that you've been able to craft that with friends too and make a collective experience and not just individual is really cool.
mm.
I should join it more often.
Well, in response to that, one, you are welcome anytime. And you're talking about getting something out. I'm a fan of the writer Anne Lamott, and she has this chapter in her book Bird by Bird called A Shitty First Draft. And
I have that book right above me. I haven't read it yet, but I have it.
yeah, so that resonated with me because I remember thinking, hey, well, yeah, I don't, it can be a shitty first draft. I don't have to, it doesn't have to be anything more or less. And then I can chip away at it and change it until I think it's a decent second draft or a hopefully excellent 20th draft, or however many drafts you need to say whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious for you, because I know you have really eclectic influences, including Brazilian music and Mbira music and all these different styles, jazz. I'm really curious to know, like, how you take a music that's very different from what you make and incorporate aspects of it into your style.
How I incorporate the different elements from my musical influences. Is that what you're asking me?
Including an influence that may be style of music that's very different from yours.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question. Well, I think about it like a melting pot. I mean, it's like a meal. I don't know where I'm going with this, but all the ingredients are in the pot and or I'm listening to something and it's going into my mental my mental pot of ingredients to use. And sometimes, wow, where am I going with this? I mean, the answer is sometimes I will intentionally use something, but also everything that I've listened to becomes part of my sonic character. So I'm using whatever I hear, what comes out, and what comes out is influenced by what I've listened to. So there's this kind of cyclical quality to what goes in and what comes out.
Mm-hmm.
That's my vague answer for you.
Mm-hmm.
What could you explain to people who are listening? What kind of music do you write?
Oh man. Well, for the show Pokemon, it's often all over the place. Although I would say that there's sort of like there's a base in Western classical music, but it's all music for the show that's made using sample libraries. Composers say in the box, which means that it's in the computer with all fake instruments. Unfortunately, which hurts my heart as a trumpet player. But it's a necessity of the time crunch that we're under. So because of that, and then also because the show itself is so, like, 15 seconds can be um, an EDM dance track, and the next 15 seconds can be you know like a classical minuet style or something. Because of that, it's really just whatever the show seems to need. We don't even think necessarily about genre. And there's lots of, in this specific series, there's a lot of synth elements because there's like this throwback, almost 80s feel to a lot of things. But I would say outside of that, I am really rooted in Western, I would say in jazz and in Western musics in general, because I grew up in U.S. with the U.S. school system, playing a Western instrument and falling in like with trumpet and falling in love with jazz music from a young age. So my music is definitely rooted in that, but I would say that I'm really interested in and learned a lot from other people that I know who play extremely different styles of music. Everything from South Asian classical music to Latin music and Cuban music and Balkan music. I'm really interested in incorporate and but I think that in terms of harmony, in terms of the way I think, it's unfortunately pretty squarely rooted in classical music and jazz.
Why, out of curiosity, why do you say the word unfortunately?
Well, I don't think in sort of a, I guess I shouldn't have even said that, but I guess in a really sort of a philosophical sense, I'm not sure if either of those are my musics. You know, if I'm making music in styles that I'm kind of a guest in.
Mm. Mm. Wow.
And, you know, if I'm lucky enough to have been a welcome guest, you know, people are, you know, the worlds of those are very expansive, and especially jazz has been inclusive despite, um, you know, generations of theft of Black creative output, um, and depoliticizing as well. You know, taking music that is inherently about Black people's attitudes to their own oppression and depoliticizing that. Um, I mean, I would say it's not only about Black people's attitudes to their own oppression, but it's about Black experiences as a whole.
Mm.
And so I would say that I've been a guest in that. And in terms of Western classical music, a very, very late comer. I was so not interested in it for the first 20 years of my life, and then fell in love with it really in college. And I would say that, yeah, so those are styles that are rooted in. In terms of my favorite styles, I mean, I think you probably know that my favorite artist of all time is Stevie Wonder. And I just love R&B and soul. And I, I feel like that's the style of music that I listen to that brings me the most happiness, but I don't make that style of music
Mm.
yet. Yeah.
Well, for those for people who are watching, if you would like to find more information out about Akhil and his music and what he's up to, you can visit his website listed right here to find more information. And if you would like some creative tips to kickstart your music writing process, you can visit my website at caseylipka.com/51tips. I have a worksheet up there if you would like to kickstart your own creative journey. So, a friend of mine, Gabe Nelson, he was wondering about you and working on Pokemon, and he was asking how often does Pokemon require new music? What does that look like?
Yeah, so there's a huge number of episodes. Every season has more than 40 episodes. So there's an episode almost every week. And in the American aesthetic of, so we're doing what's called localization, which is where we change the music to fit the American aesthetic and the the English language dub that is also then exported to all the countries that watch it in English. Um, so I want to clarify, I worked for Ed Goldfarb, who is the main composer on the show. I'm credited as I think, additional music composer, music editor, and orchestrator. And so under his direction, what we do is we actually are able to cover, I would say, the majority of every episode with music we've already written for previous episodes. And that's what I do with music editing. Um, and then there's a chunk, sometimes it's a huge chunk and sometimes it's a small chunk of every episode that requires new music because there's a new character or a new location that they're in, or some other thing that doesn't. uh, Ed has created a sort of a almost an operatic way of giving characters leitmotifs, or I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, or melodies that correspond to them as well, which we did a lot more in previous series than this one. Um, and then we go back and forth. I orchestrate it. Sometimes there's revisions, but I would say that every week there's between 2 and 8 minutes of new music.
Wow. Wow. how do you approach that musically? You were kind of talking about that briefly.
Yeah, so we work in Pro Tools, and I first usually sketch my scene using a piano instrument. I'm starting to change this because of private lessons in composing and arranging that I've been able to get recently, um, which have blown my mind open about what I should do differently. But I, I, uh, I first usually sketch it in a piano instrument, sometimes just a melody line, and then we have a template which includes all the major orchestral instruments as well as some synths that we've been able to sort of identify as the sound of this particular series, and um, and then I basically I expand the piano sketch out to that palette.
Mm, wow. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think you were kind of talking about this too, sketching. Do you come up with something completely new, or do you rework an established theme from show to show?
Right. I would say a lot of it is reworking themes, especially themes that Ed has composed for different characters, reworking them to fit the drama of a mood. I mean, drama of a scene. Um, I would also say that sometimes it is completely new. They're in a completely new place and there's a completely new character, and we have to start from scratch in that theme. But yeah, a lot of it is working with stuff that we've already composed before.
Mm. So for people who are watching, I realize that we're making some distinctions that maybe people who are watching don't understand. So I want to clarify, what's the difference between a composer, an orchestrator, and an arranger?
So I think the difference between orchestrator and arranger is blurry and more based on genre, but a composer. So the difference between composing and orchestrating or arranging is that orchestrating and arranging has to do with working with a composition that a composer has already created, and either setting it for a different set of instruments or a larger set of instruments, or reworking it in some way that adds your creative input, but it's still in some ways recognizably the creative work of the composer.
Mm.
So you can think of it as doing a cover, except that sometimes an orchestrator takes what is just a sketch and fully makes. So if you think of it in the art context, a composer may detail what their intentions are using pencil and paper, and then the orchestrator comes in and can decide what colors to use and makes it a fully fleshed out painting. Yeah. But sometimes orchestrators or arrangers are taking a fully fleshed out painting and reworking it in a different way to make a different painting. Or it's kind of like a remix if you think of it in pop music.
Yeah. If I'm going to go with that, the composer is the person who draws the painting. The arranger is the person who says, "Oh, these I'm going to have other people try and do the painting, so use these colors." And then
Exactly.
the orchestrator says, "Okay, all of these colors, you're going to play this color, you're going to play this color, you're going to play this color."
Although I think that both the orchestrator and the arranger do both those things. I think when people say orchestrator, they're usually talking about the specific set of colors that is the orchestra.
Yeah.
Whereas an arranger could be doing for that, or they could be doing it for a rock band, or they could be doing it for anything.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know, what do you wish you would have known when you first started writing music?
Oh, wow. There's so much. I wish I hadn't quit piano at a young age. I feel like it's one of the most amazing tools for composing. And I think the better I get at piano, which is not, I'm not very good so far, but the better I get, the better I will get as a composer and arranger. I also wish I had voice and drum lessons. I think one of the things that's really amazing about playing trumpet is that you are you first of all, the trumpet is an instrument that works a lot like the voice in a lot of ways, in my opinion, where a lot of the same things that are difficult for a singer are difficult for a trumpet player in terms of maybe big jumps or playing high, especially playing high quietly or playing high after a leap up as opposed to walking up. You know, for a trumpet player or for a singer, it's easier to stepwise get up to a high note. I would say it's also difficult to play or sing something that you're not clearly hearing in your head. So because of all those things, I think that if you're a composer who plays an instrument that is very similar to the voice, it helps in terms of being able to write melodies that are very that are singable and are melodic and lyrical. And it also helps to remember that instruments have to take breaths. Instruments can't play a long line the way a piano or a guitar can. I mean, those are instruments too, but I should say wind instruments need to take breaths. And a good melody, even for those instruments that don't need to breathe, will have breaths worked in because that's what all these instruments are extensions of the voice. And so I think ideally, I will hopefully, through practice and based on the influence of being a trumpet player, be able to write beautiful melodies for all the instruments, including inner voices, including, like internal lines that are not even meant to be the most important one in the scene. I also think that I've played in a ton of really terrible rehearsals. I've played in Casey is, I'm sure, also played in lots of terrible rehearsals. We played in some of the same terrible rehearsals. That's all I'll say on the matter. But the point is that you, you learn what really annoys musicians during rehearsals, and you hopefully don't replicate that when you're leading rehearsals. Although some people leading rehearsals have also played in terrible rehearsals. The point is that I'm glad about that, but I feel like I could have been a better composer now if I if I embraced learning more about the voice and also learning more about drums and piano. So if anybody is looking to start composing and there's one of those three instruments that they don't know or multiple, don't make the same mistake as me. That would be if you played piano, drums, and sang well as you were also learning composing. That's that's a that's really formidable.
So it sounds like for you, you wish that you had steeped yourself in different instruments to have the experience to pull from in your composition process when you're working with other people, maybe even to communicate ideas.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I'll say for a TV composer is that there are two things that I recommend to do differently than me. One is a film composer is really a type of filmmaker. In fact, it's really weird that film composing is taught in music schools and not in film schools. I think that one thing that I I do love movies and TV, but I still am not sure if I love them enough for to be a really good film composer or TV composer, because the people that I admire and respect the most as film and TV composers, including people who are my age or younger who are just brilliant, are just they're so passionate about cinema, and that really and they're so knowledgeable about it, and you could tell that all the film kids were their friends growing up. They made little home movies. And that music is just their way of participating in that. So I think that that's something that, I mean, I bring a different perspective, and that's fine. And I do love movies and TV, but the truly great ones, I think, are really filmmakers at heart. And the other thing is that in the present day, especially when so many of us, including myself, you work from other more established film and TV composers, having a really solid, strong foundation in technology is just indispensable. I I was never tech savvy growing up, despite my parents being very tech savvy. So I'm learning all this late. I'm learning, and I think that I get overwhelmed easily with it. But I've definitely pushed through enough to do what I need to do creatively, and I view it much more as a tool that I just have to make do with. But there are people who really thrive in that setting, and I think that that's really helpful if that's your personality as well for film and TV composing.
Got it. Well,
Yeah.
for those of you who are watching, I mean, Akhil's being pretty modest. He's a phenomenal composer and arranger, and you are making a living doing that. So
I know. It's like really miraculous. I'm really lucky. More people should be able to.
so regardless of how you feel, I mean, how we feel about our art is important, and of course, your life trajectory or what you're doing creatively may shift, but you are immensely talented at what you did.
Thank you. You are too.
Oh, thank you. So if you want to find some of his music, you can go to his website, which is listed here. And I compiled some creativity tips to some tips to spark creativity. And you can find them here at caseylipka.com/51tips. Akhil, thank you so much for joining me today. Is there anything else you'd like to share, you'd like people to know about you before we end?
One is just that I'm a really big fan of Casey Lipka's music, and that you should check it out, and that she's a phenomenal bass player and singer and composer and songwriter. And we're fellow aficionados of Brazilian music. Anyway, I think people should really check out Casey's music. And then I would also say, let's see. I guess I just want to wish everybody well during this like absolutely horrible time. So thinking of especially people whose kids are in school right now.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And I want to give you one more plug, because if you are a singer-songwriter out there and you want to have your music arranged for a specific band or a specific set of instruments, Akhil is your person. I mean,
I would love to.
Yeah, and I'm saying this for myself too, because I keep talking about doing something together in that capacity, and we have collaborated on something that I'm going to release soon, which I'm so excited about.
That was so fun. Yeah, I'm excited for people to hear that too.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining me again. This is where you can find Akhil's information and some of his music. And please check out some tips for sparking your creativity and your creative voice here at caseylipka.com/51tips. And last thing is, I'm excited next week here on Facebook Live, I'm hosting an interview with Natalie Hagwood, who's a cellist and a vocalist. She's 1/3 of Dear Darling, which I'm in, and I'm in as well. And so she is definitely my creativity collaborator in musical sonic crime, whatever that means. But we do so many projects together, so I'm so excited to interview her and talk about music. Thank you, Akhil. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you as well. Yeah. Thank you for organizing this space.
Yeah, it's wonderful to learn more about your creative process and how you think about music, and gather your insights on creativity. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
All right, everyone. See you next week. It's on Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time and 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for joining us. See you next